Welcome to the State of the Tabletop Industry Comic-Con for Virtual Comic-Con. I'm Ross Thompson. I'm a marketing manager at the OP, and I'm excited to have a wonderful group of panelists here to talk about what's happening in the tabletop industry right now. Tony?
Hi, my name is Tony Serebriany. I am the Director of Inventor Relations and International Sales at the OP.
Scott?
Hey there, I'm Scott Gaeta, President and Publisher at Renegade Games Studios.
Mandy?
I'm Mandy Hutchinson, also known as the Board Gaming Pinup Girl, and I'm a content creator with To Die For Games and The Dice Tower.
Mary?
I'm Mary Couzin, and I am president and founder of Chicago Toy and Game Group. We host a series of events promoting play and innovation in November, and we used to, prior to the pandemic, host pub events around the world.
Eric?
I'm Eric Lang. I'm the game director at CMON, or Come On.
How is that pronounced, right? So
I think it's officially Come On, but I'm a creature of habit.
come on now. So we are gathered here virtually because we could not be gathered in person at Comic-Con. With COVID-19 happening, the industry has had to change how it works and does business. How have we handled that as an industry? Open question.
Badly.
Uh-oh.
Well,
Eric,
I mean, could you elaborate on that?
I
Eric?
can, right? So with conventions have all been closed down. Distributors have been forced to shut. Game stores have been forced to close as well. Plus, we all have to meet in virtually. We can't drive to our offices and place of business. Along with that, we were worried about maybe review copies not being able to go out, and playtest groups have all changed. That's a lot that's been happening. We're used to traveling, once or twice a month to go to different conventions, to go to offices to get our stuff. Along with that, with everything happening with international shipping and manufacturing, we weren't getting a lot of games from China right away, and then from there, distributors weren't able to pick them up and then get those to stores. So essentially, every part of our industry and business has felt the effects of what's happening with COVID-19. But here we are still promoting games and playing games, and people are adapting and moving forward. So is that a viable thing for the gaming industry? Can we sustain by doing things virtually, or how are we adapting and growing from there? Scott?
Yeah, I mean, I would say from our perspective, it's been difficult, but we probably have it the easiest of all tiers in the industry. As a publisher, right, we can pivot, and we have other outlets. It's not like sales stopped. Online sales actually started to boom, through some channels, because people still want entertainment, and our entertainment has a pretty high return on investment, right? For the cost of a game, you get a lot of value out of it. So we probably had it the easiest, even though it's been difficult. I think the tier of our industry that's had it the most difficult has been the stores, because the stores are these clubhouses, mom and pop shops where people come to gather, and when they shut down, they're essentially dead in the water for a period of time, and I think that's difficult. And I think in the long run, that's bad for us in the industry. So how we can get stores back on track, or how stores can pivot and try to change their value proposition and still cater to their communities is important.
Are a lot of these, if you don't mind if I jump in quickly, are a lot of these stores, do they have an online presence? Or is this like a learning curve now that they say, hey, maybe we have to do this in order to sustain our business?
I feel like they do. I think almost every major store has an online presence, of course, but when their online presence is competing with the big dogs, right? They're competing directly with Amazon, and their strongest value add, which is exactly what Scott was talking about, the clubhouse social effect, they don't have it. So now they only have disadvantages. It's really hard.
Right. Well, there are some Astra stores, specialty stores, that actually did not have an online presence, surprisingly, and they are really hurting right now.
Yeah, and if there was a presence, it may have just been informational and sharing calendar of events kind of stuff. So from an e-com perspective, as Mary just said, there's probably a large swath of stores that have never even considered trying to put sales online, and to do so, the burden of overhead could be too steep for them to even want to consider it. So as some communities are slowly beginning to have retail outlets open, it's going to be important for all of us and all of our fans to do what we can to support those friendly local game stores in order to get some semblance of community back there. And I think it will take a while for that sense to really reestablish itself. But the key piece, first and foremost, is if these stores haven't closed for the long term, then any kind of business we can give them or our fans can give them is going to help sustain them through these challenging times.
Yeah,
So,
I feel like,
yeah,
sorry for us. I mean, I feel like there's two tracks here, right? That a lot of people are thinking about, right? There's the return to normal track, and then there's the what new world are we entering track, right?
Exactly.
And a lot of us are in public. A lot of us are talking about the return to normal track, right? But I promise you, a lot of publishers, a lot of us here at the table there's a lot of conversation about the what world do we return to track, and we're all entrepreneurs, we're all business people. We all we think about what does post-COVID world look like? And my guess is, I'm speaking for myself only. I'm not business development manager. Come on, I'm just a freelance entrepreneur, right? But it's not. I don't feel like there is not a return to normal, not short term, right? This will be lasting long enough for habits to change, and we need to spend a lot of real effort and possibly collaborative effort on how do we enter this new world, and how do we enter this new world? Gaming's not going to change. Everybody's going to still want to play games. Gamings are going to, Scott put it so well, right? So eloquently, right? The gaming is a high return on investment for everybody. That's never going to change. But the delivery mechanism that we have right now, the way our industry works, I think any weaknesses that we may have been very strongly highlighted by this interruption to the supply chain. And if we're being honest with ourselves, we have to put some serious thought into what does rebuilding that look like, and what parts of it do we rebuild?
Right. But then who leads that? Do you know what I mean? Who is the person
the invisible hand of the market?
Right. I mean, that in itself is a big step. So I'm only asking because I'm not on that end of it. You know what I mean? You all have a bit more experience or spend a bit more time with those, people that have those types of stores. So this is why I'm asking the questions, and I'm sure there are people listening who have those questions too. So thank you.
Yeah, I mean, my feeling is that who drives it, it's going to be a combination of things, right?
Right.
Like that invisible hand of the market, is honestly something that is a major factor in all of our lives. It's the consumers and their wants. And like Eric was saying, habits are being changed. We've seen this before in human history, and habits and patterns are changing, and people are adapting. So that's going to drive things for sure. I do think that there's a place for what exists today. I think there's a place for it tomorrow as well. I just think it needs to evolve.
Right.
Absolutely.
And it needs to adapt. And in some ways, these aren't necessarily bad changes. We just need to adapt and grow. And in the end, we may wind up in a much better place than we are today. I use this analogy a lot describing stores. I still think that, friendly local game stores, comic shops, all those types of stores, I still think those are the best places for a niche specialized experience. If I'm a fan of a specific thing, I'm going to get the best service and, great selection, and get to interact with people behind the counter that share my passion and are very knowledgeable in it. But the truth is, those mountaintop experiences we are not a planet of mountains. We are a planet of mountains and valleys. And in those valleys, between those mountaintop experiences, there's a lot of space that's underserved. Mm-hmm. And there are a lot of people that either are into gaming or could be into gaming that don't have a mountaintop experience in their backyard.
Yeah.
So
this is our problem where I live. We literally have very few stores that I can go into, like comic stores or kind of gaming places where I can sit down and have a game. It's mostly online. Actually, we end up ordering from bigger cities like Toronto because they have a bigger, amount of games in their stock. So I'm hoping that changes, but I don't know. The way things are going now, maybe everything will be more virtual because we don't have that to begin with.
Well, and so on that, we at the beginning of back in March, I think there was a mad rush to see how many games can be played over Zoom. right? How many games can be played over a live stream? And we saw a lot of Jackbox obviously picked up really big because it was already there, right? And then we've kind of seen different games adapt and move, and now we've been about 3 months, like 95 days into this. We're seeing different game companies now create platforms literally on Twitch where it's like, here's our game now that you can play on Twitch. And we're seeing different companies like Wizards of the Coast, and they're doing D&D Live starting in June, where they're going to have people playing things much more. Roll20's taking a much larger presence on different things too. And we've seen the board game category on Twitch has totally grown. Before this, it was a handful of people that were actively doing stuff daily. And now there's been a lot more, and a lot of those channels and review people that were doing that, they were like, oh yeah, we're doing stuff live, it's super cool. But now it's like, oh, we're going to be doing stuff every day at this time. And now it's totally like most companies are like, I need to promote this and do these things. So we're seeing a lot more of us kind of gravitate toward that, because as we live on Facebook and Twitter in regards to how we're consuming these things, a lot of these channels that, weren't, they were doing a blog review here and there or a YouTube review, but now like those that kind of picked up on the Twitch and the live stream stuff have really kind of like informed a new path, which is cool, because that wouldn't have been a thing, 3 months ago. But now it's, how do you evolve?
So Ross, I got to be a little bit tough on our industry in this case, right? I agree with you, everything you said, right? But watching how our hobby evolved. So I've been in video games for several years, right? And video games went through this, they went through a transformational period in 2008 to 2014, where they realized everything we're talking about now, right? Where converted content, right? Players adapting their content adapting games to create their own content, to form their own subbases, to become much more networked ambassadors. That was the way forward, or at least that was a major way forward. That's been available for almost a decade. And in my opinion, it should have been a much stronger consideration in our industry, with or without COVID.
Yeah.
Right, we have ambassador programs. We have we're a network-based business. We thrive when we inject gamers with we inject really passionate gamers with a drive to move forward and spread our games out to other people. The platforms exist for them to do that. And when Scott's talking about like adapting, right? I think this is it, right? Yeah. And it shouldn't only be a consideration for sales and distribution. It should be a consideration all the way to the beginning, all the way through development, through design, through ideation. Like when we come up with when we're talking about games early on in our process, right? What is the streaming experience of this game like is part of the earliest design conversations that we have, right? How do we make this more streamable? How can we make this engaging across a network, right? It's not always the case, but the question is not, sometimes the answer is we can't, but it should more often be how.
So question for you then, Eric, based on that experience personally, in your development process at CMON, do you do that? Do you have that? How is this product going to be more streamable and shareable in this platform?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah. So
absolutely. I mean, I can't divulge too many. I mean, that's tradecraft, right?
But speaking from experience,
absolutely.
That's brilliant, right?
Absolutely. And I mean, we've been doing this for years now. I want to be careful, right? Because this sounds like a horrible humble brag, but I do feel like that's the video game side of our background coming in. We've been doing it for years, and a lot of people I've talked to have been doing this for years too. But I do feel like that needs to be a much more serious effort. And I do believe on retail that retailers could adopt that as well, right? Retailers are they are the hub for gaming ambassadors to physically spread the game from area to area. And I'm talking about games and gamers spreading games as if we're living in a weird time right now where something else like that is happening. But you know what I mean.
Right.
That analogy off.
Yeah. So along with that, we have a way, like we'll go into playtesting for a little bit in publisher pitching, right? So we normally go to a lot of conventions and we accept publisher different games they're working on. That's how a lot of new games are found, like in Origins and Gen Con and Gamma. Those are places that publishers can go to meet new designers and learn new game pitches. That with conventions not happening right now. How are we working to adjust that and help out and support those designers?
Well, I can speak a little bit to that, and I'm sure the others will have some similar experience, but I'd say similarly with these visual tools and digital streaming tools or even recording tools, a lot of the designers that I've been meeting with over the last 10 years have adapted to putting together visual and video pitches anyway, as a way to do a leave behind for a 30-second to a 2-minute sizzle, so that if the meeting gets interrupted or as a reminder, I've got something tangible to reflect back on and or to share internally with the team. So now with this interruption of not getting to meet face-to-face, that's becoming even more prevalent. Now, I've got the good opportunity to meet like this with game designers, but I'm getting more submissions that are video submissions, which then lend itself to that last discussion, which is how can this then leverage into this kind of format from a play experience perspective?
Yeah, Mary.
Oh, I'm sorry. I was just going to say, I agree.
Yeah.
We've had the same experience. I think the design community has adapted pretty quickly. Those that weren't there have gotten there very fast. So sorry.
No, you're good. But Mary, with all the different stuff that ShyTag does to promote publishers, what has been going on there?
Well, we haven't announced yet, but we'll be going virtual, as many other shows in November. We were hopeful that we might be like the first show to be in person, but it's not looking that way right now. So we are running right now a Young Inventor Challenge spring sprint of sorts, which has been very successful. So we know that translates well. And much like Tony said, that they're all video submissions, right? And so we know our inventor conferences with a combination of Zoom and the platform we use for the Young Inventors will be very successful. And in fact, we think we'll have a bigger reach, that we'll be able to have more inventors participate from around the world. So, it's more of an even playing ground, right? For people who don't have to spend as much money to be part of the pitch, if you will.
Can I expand on that? Because what Mary said was really powerful, right? And I think I actually think it's game changing, right? Because one of the principal points of friction in our industry right now is that we basically draw from the same talent pool, right? It's expanding, but it's not expanding very quickly. That talent pool is a very privileged talent pool that we're all part of, right? People who can go to conventions that already have some kind of network. But there's amazing talent out there that doesn't have this. And exactly as Mary was talking about, if we are reaching out and finding this talent and giving them an efficient way to show games to us is amazing. Like I've met with, I want to say 40, but I think it's actually more than that. New designers that I've never met at a convention before in the last 9 days, and they have amazing ideas, right? They're a little more green, but they're amazing, and they're diverse, and it blows my mind. It's re-energized my passion for this part of the process, and this, to me, that's the silver lining of all this, right? We're going to get some amazing stuff out of this. And Mary, I'd love to talk to you at the show more about how you network, because you probably have efficiencies that we don't.
Hey, anytime. I'm not going anywhere, as they say right now, that's for sure. I'd actually even like to share a quote, which is really funny. So this morning I got a video from a young inventor whose game got published by Goliath Games. It's called You Betcha, or no, Betcha Can't. Sorry, it's in Target. And she actually, in her video, it's hysterical. She goes, "I'm 13 and I've been inventing all my life, but I didn't start inventing in the toy industry until I was 11. And I was like, this is hysterical, but they have a great game, and she's got other games she wants to pitch, and that's what we want to encourage, right? Young inventors, new inventors, design students, and
100%.
Right. So it's very exciting.
That's a great quote.
Amen.
So, Eric, you bring up a good point, how a lot of our stuff really is network-based and going to shows and doing these different things. And for the different virtual shows, do we feel that those are a good crutch, I guess, or kind of substitute as we're going forward? Like, I know Mary just said that they're looking at doing for ShyTag, but how can these virtual shows that have been happening, how do you think they can improve and maybe add more to help support the industry right now? Scott, you just ran Renegade Con, right? How did that?
We did. We just ran it a couple weeks ago, and you know, it was challenging to put together, but I think it did what we wanted it to do. We had a couple thousand participants over 2.5 days, and we ran panels and workshops, and we had demos on a platform and RPG games on another platform, and used Discord as kind of our booth, and staffed it. And you know, it's never gonna be as engaging as an experience in a physical space where you get to meet people and hang out with them and actually sit across the table from them. But it did bring community together, and we just sent out a survey recently, and people overwhelmingly were positive. We got some good feedback. We're going to do it again. But really surprised me, probably one of the most prevalent comments was that people said it did feel like a convention. There was a lot of programming, you know, on purpose. We had different tracks of programming running, so you had to make choices. You couldn't just do everything, and you had to just choose whether or not you wanted to go to this workshop or this panel. And we recorded it all, and we'll put it up later. But it was kind of cool. Like, we were joking around internally, like, it's like a convention, but I get to sleep in my own bed. So that was a plus. But you know, it won't replace physical events. But like to Eric and Mary's point, we probably were able to engage with many people that normally couldn't even go to a physical convention.
Yeah, exactly.
They don't have one in their area, or they can't afford the travel to go to one. I mean, it's an extreme privilege that we get to go to a convention at all. They are not inexpensive, right? Or even if you have the funds, many people give up their vacation time, and that's their vacation, is to go to a Gen Con or a Comic Con or a ShyTag. Like, that's their vacation time, even if they're an up-and-coming designer or they're a fan. And that's a sacrifice, right?
Right.
So being able to get online and participate and interact with people online just eliminates so many barriers. So I thought it was powerful.
Touching
Scott,
on what you
able to, sorry, Mary.
No, go ahead. I can.
Sorry, I'm sorry, that wasn't even Mary. God, Mandy. I just want to follow up. Were you able to capture demographic info that you might, if you're allowed to share it?
So some we very basic. Like, this is always a fine line. Like, we that wasn't the goal. Was to capture it, but in our surveys, I would say that next time we could delve a lot deeper. We have very, very basic demographic info. Right.
Because I have a hunch. Sorry, I interrupted that. But I have a hunch, because we did CMON Expo like a few weeks ago. My hunch, based on like pure anecdote and spending time sort of hilltop level surveying the audience, was the demographic of this con was much closer to the demographic, to the wider gaming demographic than I've ever seen at a convention. Right? Like, more women than men. Yep. More families, parents and kids, lots, and people from all backgrounds, right? That was amazing.
Right.
Because it's so easy to forget about that when we go to conventions. We see sort of the descendants of Gary Gygax and Dave Arneson, right?
Right. Yeah. Oh, for sure. I mean, it's easy to get caught in that bubble of, you go to Gen Con or something and say, these are my customers. These are the people that I'm serving. And it's, you know, it's barely to the horizon, right? It's just, it's a small little bubble. There's so many more people that we can touch and that we can reach, that many that they don't even know about these conventions, let alone, you know, make the effort to go to them. You know, so we're just at the tip of the iceberg in our industry, which is exciting. And I think there's a lot of opportunity.
So yeah, so touching on what both Eric and Scott were saying, I know I get a lot of people, I was part of Renegade Con, I was one of the hosts, and I had a lot of people approach me after and say, you know, I have social anxiety, or I can't go to a convention, there's just too many people. And a lot of them felt really safe to go in that kind of virtual environment and be a part of it. So I thought that was really nice. Those people who have never experienced one were able to do that comfortably. Additionally, having virtual conventions, I call this like a no excuse sort of convention. So maybe people who would not have been invited to be a guest at a convention, you know what I mean? Because, oh, well, we only have spots for select people. Now you don't have an excuse to say, well, you know, we can ask that group over here or ask this group over here that you normally wouldn't see at a convention. So I think that's easier to do now because it's virtual. There's a lot more organization, I find, with the tech and other things in a virtual convention. But when we did Renegade Con, I found it as a content creator, someone who's a host, I found it very organized. I've been part of others that were not. And then it's not as successful. And people see that, right? They want to be part of something that's run well and that represents, they can see themselves represented as well in that convention.
Right. That's a really good point. I would say that we don't have really a huge representation from the RPG community in this panel. But being one that lives on Twitter, like the RPG community on Twitter, they have just picked up and run during all of this. They've been,
oh my God, yes.
It has been, it's and especially like in the last few weeks, I think we're seeing so many different people that are designing games and creating content that never, you know, would have been able to get this. But now that we're seeing all these different talks and Twitches that are going on, and like there's a D&D roundtable that's happening and all these different things that are just fantastic. It is honestly very refreshing because it's just like, this is so cool. It's, as we've kind of said, it's not the same faces that we always see, which is still great because we have a lot of good people that have good wisdom to share. But this next wave of people that we're going to start seeing making games and designing and sharing content, I'm really excited for it because I think it's the more that we can do to push that forward is going to be good. And especially like on Twitch, I think every other weekend there's some big, here's a big game happening here, here's a big game happening here with people that normally wouldn't have gotten like the light of day. And now with like even D&D Live, like they've been bringing, I know I've been using that a couple times today. I just think it's kind of a cool pinnacle where they're bringing in celebrities that normally wouldn't be playing games, and they're showing them to people that's a good way for us to, hey, we're here playing games, rolling dice is cool, right? So
absolutely. One of the cool things is we're sort of democratizing that first con experience. Right, we've all been to this a long time, but I'll bet you every one of you remembers your first con. Right?
Oh yeah.
For better or for worse, I hopefully better, but like I will never forget what it was like to actually see your passionate hobby, like as part of a great big group of people. Even though you don't know them, you're instantly friends with them, right? And I think. We take that for granted because we've been doing this for 20 years. But that first con experience for, I'll bet you, my gut tells me that a lot of the people that were very positive, that gave Scott a very positive reception, were the ones that had that first con experience. Like, that they had nothing to compare it to. This is amazing. Right. There's an issue that I think that I would love to try to tackle, or at least bring into the more mainstream conversation, is one of the things that's awesome about conventions is that the attendees, they feel like the attendees feel they get the positive reinforcement of hanging out in groups, right? Forming little groups or going from group to group. In virtual conventions, they're funneled into a comment section, right? So they're not getting that upside. I would love to talk more about how, like, or at least philosophically, how we could replicate that part, or at least, or do in the online space, something that actually lets people enjoy the intimacy of smaller groups rather than being more spectators.
Well, I've had gotten a good opportunity to attend a couple of theater events via Zoom, and also some broader conversations related to anti-racism based on what's going on currently in the world and in this country. And in the platform, specifically here in Zoom, we can create breakout rooms.
I was just about to say that.
So just to your point, Eric, it's like, if there's this funnel that's bringing us to this broad panel discussion, and then we have the ability to break out into smaller subgroups, and the moderators have a sensibility as to who wants to or should be together in those groups, like the 6 of us are right now, we can then have this more intimate connection and conversation that's deeper and meaningful around whatever the core subject is that brought us together. So if it's RPGs, then we've got, multiple different publishers or storylines that we're able to meet around. And I think within the gaming community, there is a way to foster that. But there's a bigger part of what I think you're talking about too, is like going to a convention as an attendee. This may be the only time you actually get to see certain friends, right?
Right, con friends, exactly right. Yeah.
Or even around the world. Like there's some publisher friends that I have that I only get to see at these conventions that are from around the world. And there is this sense of community that's created by sharing time and space and playing games and sharing meals and drinks and actually getting to spend time together. So I think the breakout rooms might be one way that we can help to foster that. And I'd love to know, Scott and Mandi, if at Renegade Con, you experienced that in particular, where there were some requests for conversations to be taken in or deeper within the context of a particular panel or a particular session.
I didn't really say it at the beginning. I'm a teacher by trade, so I teach virtually online, and we use breakout rooms all the time. So if you ever want to consult on how to use breakout rooms, call a teacher, because we use them to put kids in groups to have discussions. But I did an art panel, and I did get a lot of people saying, hey, we'd love to have like a side conversation to talk about, you know, a specific topic with a smaller subset or group versus publicly online. They were happy to be part of that, but it just would have given that more intimate kind of situation. Right. Breakout rooms on a whole are hard though, because not every platform has them, right? So now you're running into and I'm going a little too deep into this, but you know, there are costs to consider because you need paid versions of programs to do that. You now need people to moderate these rooms properly, which then comes with training, right? Do you have people that can moderate fairly, transparently and make people feel welcome? So these are just a few things that you have to consider. So while it's a great idea, it does create more things that have to be addressed.
Mandi, do you think any of that could be algorithmically generated? So in a sense that like, so if you have like 1,000 people at a convention, right, where because everybody technically has to enter in demographic data anyway, right? You have to fill in sort of a survey. Do you think there's a possibility that you could sort of algorithmically generate breakout rooms so that you don't, with the potential issues that come with that? But
sure.
That sounds like an efficiency.
Probably possible. Now you also run into issues with, and I guess this is hard in any context, but if someone's not comfortable with a certain group or a certain person, or do you know what I mean? Like if you are breaking off, you have a bit more control of that versus if it's just something that's generated. I mean, there's always going to be something, but that is something to consider, but it is possible.
Right.
Yeah.
Cool. Okay.
This is at the top of our list. Like after we did our first Renegade Con, that was the piece that was missing, right? More than anything, of
same.
They just want to get together and hang out.
Yeah.
So we don't have any great solutions right now either. I mean, I think the technology that we have is serviceable to a certain extent, but it has its limitations. But we're going to try some different things for the next time, but we don't have any earth-shattering answers. We know that it's a problem.
You need people who are well-versed in this area. Do you know what I mean? That's the problem. And it means you're going to have to hire people. You're going to have to pay people. You're going to have to work with people. And it doesn't happen in a day or two. You have to test things. It's not going to work. And then you try something different, right? So do we have the time frame to do that? Do we have the money to do that? That's the resources to do that, the training. Like these are things that we have to consider.
The upside is profit. So it sounds like we...
True. That is true.
It sounds like an endeavor worth pursuing, in my opinion.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Okay, sorry, I'm like, my brain is literally flowing now with like, oh man, we could totally do some design workshops and all this through Zoom.
Oh
and
yeah,
really cool
totally.
To kind of get
That's
that
what
going.
happens when you get a bunch of industry people in a room together.
I mean, that's what we're talking about, right? I'm glad we can have this panel to kind of have this discussion, but it's good. So I have some other questions that I wanted to cover really quick was, so Kickstarter is still a big part of our industry. In the last 3 months, we saw Frosthaven be the most funded Kickstarter in our space. And we're seeing Tuesdays are the big day, right? So we always see different ones launch. I think right now there's a few that have gone up, and it's been really cool to kind of see how those are still growing. People are still wanting to spend money on games through that system. It's been 10 years now, 11 years now with Kickstarter. Like we've seen it evolve, and it's still kind of growing and changing. But it's pretty much gone side by side now with how we're doing retail and distribution. Is Kickstarter still going to be a viable platform going forward? Are publishers still like really wanting to use this? Is it for big projects, or is it for testing out things? How are we still going to be using Kickstarter and crowdfunding in general going forward? That's fair enough. Yeah,
I only know from a consumer point of view. And being a Canadian, Kickstarter is really expensive for me. But guess what? Since I've been here, off, I'm at home. Oh, let's check what's on Kickstarter today. And then, I've bought more games on Kickstarter since we've been home than I have normally, just because it's really expensive for us as Canadians, because the US dollar, it's high for us. So as a consumer point of view, I mean, they're not hurting.
This is super hard for me to talk about, right? Because
no.
Of course, I have a great deal of philosophical study done on the platform, right? I'm also the game director for a publicly traded company. And we have very strict rules on tradecraft. So I guess I can say safely that Kickstarter is easily its own ecosystem at this point. And I believe that it is an ecosystem that is adjacent to our industry. The Venn diagram between Kickstarter and our industry is not a perfect circle by any means. It's proven sustainable. It's the only issue it has is that its community is a little more fragmented than I thought it would be at this point. But I feel like that's just an inefficiency they're going to fix, or that'll organically fix over time. But I mean, as a distribution platform, it's here to stay. Absolutely, it is here to stay. And I think most of the forward-thinking publishers are ones that view it as a marketing event and an engagement event, more than an investment opportunity, which people thought at first were. But I mean, how long did that last? Like
not that long. Yeah,
not long at all. I feel like the way we, as a publisher, the way we design games for Kickstarter is completely different from the way we design games for retail. And it is an evolving craft, right? The way we designed Zombicide in 2011, completely different from the way that we're doing our next Kickstarter game, completely different, right? And it's based on an evolved understanding of what we think the platform is going to be. Is it a Kickstarter exclusive game? Is it not? Why is it not? Is it, who do we believe our demographics are? Like, Kickstarter offers us data that our normal channels don't give us, right? Which is an eternal thorn in my side. I'll bet you Scott could talk about it forever. I don't know if he wants to.
Oh, it's
lack of data is the thing that just makes us crazy. Yeah. Kickstarter offers that, right? So we have a better insight into that ecosystem than we do even into the ecosystem we've been in for 20 years, that we're still sort of guessing by gut. So yeah, it's definitely going to be a future for sure. And I mean, there are companies like Awaken Realms that are Kickstarter companies, right? They have a retail back end, but they're Kickstarter companies, and they've really optimized that. Like they're a top to bottom. What's the business? They're vertical. Full Kickstarter vertical company at this point.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with Eric. Like, when Renegade started, we didn't use Kickstarter for the first 3 years. And then we tested it for an RPG because it was our first role-playing game. So we were going into that space for the first time. And from our point of view, that was a segment of the game industry, the customer base, that we didn't have a direct connection with. So what better way to reach them is through a marketing event, right? Through an acquisition event. And then we tested it with Overlight, with a role-playing game. And then that really was a test and a dry run for us for Power Rangers. Right. So Power Rangers is a license, and the way that game was positioned was it wasn't a game for kids that are current fans of the TV show. It was a game for parents today who grew up with Power Rangers in the 90s and that may or may not be gamers today and wanted a more appropriate experience for their age and sophistication level, but that was still a Power Rangers experience. But when we got together internally, we said, well, who's a Power Rangers fan? We don't know. How do we reach them? We don't know. Are they in the gaming space? Maybe some of them are, but we thought we basically said there are as many more Power Rangers fans that might play our Power Rangers game than there are in the gaming space. So how do we bring them into our space? And we used Kickstarter for that, and we ran a campaign that was meant as to use that as a platform, as a marketing platform, and an event for 3 weeks to acquire and educate Power Rangers fans of who we are and what we had to offer and bring them into our space. And it was incredible. That's one of our most robust fan groups. We have a Facebook group with 5,000 members. They are incredibly active in that group. And we hear comments all the time that this is their first hobby game, that they were not gamers. And even more so, our game is a miniatures game doesn't come pre-painted. Now we've turned them into painters. There's a whole other subset of that community that are painters now. And we have a painting group and we do painting tutorials and all sorts of stuff. So we built a community around that. And Kickstarter was a big part of the mechanism that we used to reach those new people and bring them into our space. So I agree. Like, I think it's a very valuable tool. And I do think it still has its place for funding for startups. I think that's incredibly valuable for people and companies that wouldn't exist otherwise. But I think it can be used effectively both ways.
So Scott, are you doing the same with the puzzles that you've got out now? I mean, they're gorgeous.
Yeah.
It was very clever, I thought.
We are. So puzzles was a category that we were going to expand into anyway. It was already, the business model was already built for it. And then COVID hit, and we hit the fast forward button and we said, all right, let's move this up by 8 months and get puzzles going. So yeah, and then we put them on Kickstarter. Really, again, we want to know who are puzzle people out there, and we kind of don't care if that campaign only captures 300 people. That's fine. Now I have 300 people that I can talk to about puzzles and what do they want and what do they want to see next, and they can give us feedback. We really want to form relationships with our early adopter type consumers, and we'll include them in the process as best we can, because they have invaluable information. All we can do is make guesses if we don't talk to people, right? So
right.
I think it's great, and it has its place. There's many people that are purists, right? And they say Kickstarter should only be used for companies that need funding, and I don't think that's valid anymore. And I think that undersells the value.
It hasn't been valid for years.
No,
I don't think. One of the tricky parts about Kickstarter, so this is one of my topics, I guess I'm talking a lot, but one of the tricky parts here is that the platform is so transparent, right? And the success model is so transparent, which is why you see so many companies following a very similar formula. Because anybody can go to a Kickstarter campaign and reverse engineer every piece of that, where in our retail business, a lot of that is opaque. One of the issues is, of course, that you will end up with a lot of campaigns that look identical to the successful ones, but don't get the success because the black box of Kickstarter is the back end. And partially what Scott was talking about is the back end, the post-Kickstarter fulfillment, the community building where you bring them back into your black box and you do your follow-up, and of course in the logistical operation itself, right? Like many people, we know the story of Adam Poots and Kingdom Death, right? But like one of the biggest Kickstarters of all time that made like $11 million, but he almost went broke because he did not have the logistics infrastructure to support that, right? Which is tough. It's tough. And the other part, of course, is that that there's a sort of pernicious myth that Kickstarter is a really good way to bypass the vetting process of publication, right? Like nobody wanted to publish my game, so I'll just Kickstart it, right? Which there's nothing wrong. Well, there's, in my opinion, there's something wrong with that. But like it's a free country, absolutely. Like Godspeed. But usually, if you try to publish a game with several different publishers and they all turn it down, that usually should be an indication that your product needs some work. The vetting process is there because we've tested the market. We know, we have an understanding of the market. And the number of these unvetted games that goes through does, to a degree, increase the noise in Kickstarter, right? Like, and it's, I feel like it's coalescing the Kickstarter fan base into like, it's starting to look more like a hockey stick now, right? Companies at the top of the hockey stick are the ones with proven track records. People are getting more and more and more skeptical of even gorgeous looking stuff that doesn't have a track record. Right. I think it's a little bit unfortunate because there's some great stuff out there that, or at least that looks great, but I think it's not going to get funded at all because people don't trust them.
Right.
Yeah.
So for time, I have one more question that we want to go over. So reviewers and influencers are having a much larger influence on the industry right now. We're looking to them to help create content on live streams we talked about, in review channels, in communities, and especially now as we're looking to do more virtual events as well. Really lean on them to kind of help bring the community together and promote our shows. How can we do more to support reviewers and how have reviewers had an effect on the industry?
All eyes on Mandi.
I know. I feel like I need to answer first on this one. I'm going to lead us down a road that, we might have some few different answers here. Okay, let's start off with, I think, so right now, you're definitely going to see a lot more people that were not using a lot of the streaming and, live play and stuff like that. You're going to see more of that coming. And in that happening, you're going to see a diversification of different types of reviewers that maybe you weren't seeing before. I think a lot of these companies, you need to kind of expand your search, So yes, I'm part of the Dice Tower and, they get a lot of things to help promote. Yeah, they're a big company, but you need to kind of move outside of that because sometimes as a content reviewer, I'll listen to somebody else and go, oh, I didn't even think about that game or have that take on it. I'm going to check that out. A lot of like those fun games that people say, oh, you have that really great game. Where did you get it? And, I got it in Asia or somewhere else. Sometimes it's from a little known reviewer that no one even thought about. And I said, oh, that's amazing. Thanks for telling me. But they don't get the visibility. So, and I mean, specifically like someone like myself, a woman of color, you don't tend to see a lot of that perspective. Right? There are not a lot of us that you visually see, but there are some out there that would like to do more, or other groups. And I think you kind of have to have a little bit of faith and kind of reach out to those people that you're seeing. Now, I'm not saying you have to go to someone who has like 1 follower. Do you know what I mean? That's not, but you don't also necessarily have to go to the person who has 1 million followers. And it's like, okay, but we've seen this perspective. We've seen this person 20,000 times. Let's get somebody else in there. And then you might be opening to yourself to other things, other perspective, other types of games to look at. So I have like a lot of things I just said there, so someone else can talk, so it's not just me, but that's just my opinion.
Well, one thing that I think is really important to tie into that is something that Scott said specifically about Kickstarter is sometimes a successful product on Kickstarter is about the engagement with the community. So if he only ends up with 300 supporters within the puzzle space, he now has a conversation going. So from a reviewer and a content creator, you may have somebody that has a very small community, but that community's reach beyond that is really extensive. And so I think it's really important to constantly be on the lookout. And thankfully, we have somebody like Ross on our team who's constantly engaged and also outreached too for finding more and more content creators that have smaller and more intimate and more impactful communities and rings of influence. And I think those are going to be, like you were saying, Mandi, more and more are popping up of diverse voices and experiences that have never been given an opportunity to have the platform. And because the playing field is becoming much more even with this kind of format, I think there's going to be a lot more of us being able to engage in a lot broader circles because of it. I'm very excited about it.
I would love to hear Mary's point of view on this because you're adjacent to us, right? Like, it's what's it like in the toy field?
Well, I started as a game inventor, by the way. I mean, that was how I got started in the industry.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, I did. My first con was Gen Con when there was about 5 women there.
Wow.
And I was about the only one not in chainmail, just saying. So
here's my business card. Please take it.
That was a long time ago. It was when it was in Milwaukee, early 90s, So, well, I'd like to see the industry really use their inventors more, make the inventors more spokespeople. It works really well in Germany, which has definitely expanded, but I like to see more of the mainstream publishers using the inventors more. I know that like Educational Insights puts the inventors, their picture, their bio on the back of the box, and Lisa Julie will tell you it sells a lot more games because it's the connection, it's telling the story, which is so important, right? We have to connect our consumers to the stories behind our products. and bring them in. So I'm actually quite passionate about this. And Tim Walsh has the best line. I think all of you might know Tim. So he says, if you sell 1 million songs, you're on a cover of Rolling Stone, 1 million books, the New York bestseller list. But if you've sold over 100 million Jengas, like Leslie Scott has, nobody knows you. And I think that needs to change. I mean, she has sold more Jengas than Taylor Swift has any one of her songs, or the Beatles, any one of their songs. Like, it's crazy when you think about it. So I'd like to see that change.
Just FYI, I use Jenga in my classroom all the time, so I use it as an icebreaker. It's fantastic.
Oh, Leslie is a close personal friend. Actually, I would be staying at her house right now if it wasn't for COVID, actually, after Disc Toys. So, but her story is fantastic, and so I'd like to see those stories get out more. And thank you. I'll let her know that.
Yeah, and Mary, let's we can definitely chat more too, because I literally my brain has been riding with oh my gosh, we should do more, especially with this virtual setting, because I know we had talked at Essen about how I wanted to have you come and talk more on the Comic-Con thing, but as we're doing more of this virtual space, I think we can really take leaps forward to help promote people that wouldn't normally have gotten that opportunity.
Mary, can I follow up on one point that you made? You're talking about, so a lot of marketing people that especially in our creative industry are really big on the idea that that brands are becoming much more lifestyle oriented. All brands, even ones that didn't have it before. Are you noticing that? Is that part of where your perspective is coming from?
Well, I've had this perspective for a few decades, so I can't really say that's the reason, but I do think you're
ahead of the curve.
Well, but I do think it's, well, when I went to my first Essen back in 2000, I had the good fortune of having Alan Moon take me around, and seeing how he was treated there was eye-opening, right? Because certainly inventors weren't treated that way in the States by any means, but I could see that people would buy new games based on who invented them, who designed them, right? And but I do think consumers today are different than consumers were a decade ago and before that. They do want to know the story now. They want to know what they're buying. I don't think they cared as much before. So yes, and I do agree with you on the lifestyle point as well.
Yeah, it's becoming more like the writer, director, producer of the film and book industries in the gaming space, and not across the board, but there are definitely publishers that celebrate the designers and authors way more. I mean, Renegade and CMON definitely do. And the Op does to some extent, but not extensively, because we're also a licensee of so many other game brand companies. But there's a slow build of that recognition happening. But I think to bring that conversation into the influencer space, I think would be really powerful, because it is all about the story. People love to know what the inspiration was, love to know that they're actually getting the opportunity to touch somebody famous or engage with somebody famous. And that brings the conversation to a different level with those people who get that experience, because they then become brand ambassadors of that game and of that person, because they've gotten a chance to engage in a way that they normally, most of us normally wouldn't, unless we go to these conventions time and time again.
Yeah.
Well, as a game designer, all I can say is this.
Well, Suzanne and I, so Suzanne, who's on the podcast, the Dice Tower podcast with me, one of our things when we started the podcast is that when we talk about a game, we talk about who designed it, who the artist was, who the publications are. So that way we get those names known, like, hey, this person did that. So now people will say, oh yeah, you were talking about so-and-so's art and I recognize it now on this. So people are now looking for that types of arts, because it is important to recognize the people that contribute to the game. It's not just one person or two people, it's a team, right? So that's absolutely really important, Tony, what you were saying.
Yeah. Working, oh, go ahead, Scott. Looked like you were about
I was just going to say, just recently I saw there was a post on social media that there's a movement to try to get Board Game Geek to expand its credit fields.
Yeah.
So that way, and that was something when I started Renegade, is I said everybody in our company is in the rule book for credits, like everybody. It takes an entire team to make this game. and to support the game and get it out the door. And I think there's a lot of value in that, not just internally, like recognizing everybody's contribution, but even the fans. I'm constantly reminding our team that, remember, we have all of our fans that play our games, we all have their dream job. This is, they would all love to do this every day for a living, as fans of games. Like, we are their happy place. We're the thing that they choose to spend their free time with. And when they get to interact with you at a convention, no matter what you do, whether you're the designer, you're the graphic designer, or just a salesperson, or marketing person, you are living the dream. And always be mindful of that. So I'm a big advocate of being very transparent and making connections with our community on that level. And also keeping in mind that we're very lucky. Like, we get to live the dream of many other people, and that's a powerful thing. And it's powerful to build community around that too, and to allow people to have some insight into that world, because they may never get the chance to do what we do. So, sorry.
That is a good note to end on too. The proctor would have just come in and said, 5 minutes left. Sorry for the yard work outside. I had to mute myself there, but I want to thank you all for coming on and talking about the tabletop industry. This has been a really good conversation. I've been lost in a couple people's things back and forth here, so I really want to say thank you all for coming on. And before we end, if you could please tell us where we can find you online, and promote a cool thing you have coming up. Tony?
So you can find us at theop.games, and also the op at Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. And some cool things that we have coming up. We've just announced that we are doing a Munchkin Disney edition, so it's going to be quite the fun universe to get to play in. And we're in the final stages of development on the Shining Coded Chronicles game. So two very exciting things coming up.
Scott?
So you can find us at renegadegames.com, at Play Renegade on Twitter, Play Renegade on Facebook, all the social stuff. I'm not going to plug any one game. We have lots of games for all ages. Check it out. Find something that's good for you.
Mandy?
Oh my goodness, I have so many places, so I'll try and do this really fast. So you can
I'd like to thank my mom.
I know, right? Thank you. So you can find me on the Dice Tower or through the website, dicetower.com. You can also have questions. If you have questions for me, I love questions. You can reach me at Mandy with an I, at dicetower.com. On social media, you can find me at Board Gaming Pinup Girl. So Instagram, I think Facebook, we've got Twitter, the whole bit. To Die For Games is another area you can find me. Again, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. And I think I've got it all. And I want to talk about our show Apptastic that we do on the Dice Tower. We are doing it weekly now that we are all at home, and I do that with my lovely co-host, Suzanne Sheldon. So check us out weekly on the Dice Tower.
Mary?
I've got a lot too. You can go to shytag.com to see our events, and our events will be in November, and they'll be virtual. I hope everyone participates. We also have recently acquired the Bloom Report, which is a news amalgamator. So if anybody has news, let us know about it. We link out to it every week. It comes out every Friday. Very excited about that. And we still have our monthly newsletters too. So hopefully everyone is registered for our newsletters. And we welcome all interviews. So if anybody would like to be interviewed, let me know. We also have Play in Education. It's our newsletter that reaches out to educators. So if there's any educators listening, we're all about that. And we are at Shy Tag Week is one of our handles. And on LinkedIn, I'm super, super involved in LinkedIn. We have got a very, actually a really active LinkedIn group, Play Innovators. So we would love to see you there too. So. And thanks for having me. This has been great.
And thank you for coming on too. Eric?
I'm simple. CMON.com, comeon.com for all of our games. You know what? Scott convinced me. I'm not going to plug any one particular thing. It's July. I don't even know what games are coming out when. I'm in development. So we have lots of cool stuff. A lot of families game stuff that you may not know of. Please check us out. Personally, I'm most active on Twitter. You can find me at Eric Lang, I think it is. I don't never remember my own handle. I'm Eric Lang on Twitter. With a warning, I talk as much about like social and political issues as I do about games. So if you don't want that, stay away.
I'm on the same page. I'm with you there.
That's it.
That's great. Well, thank you all for coming on and being a part of the State of the Industry panel for Virtual Comic-Con. Please enjoy and follow the panelists below. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.